huge turnout. Well, I know this is a record. We had 82 sometime back when Lou Vickery came and presented a really nice program on some of the Creek Indian history. But I'm sure we got more than 82 today. So thank you all for coming. And I just want to say just a few words about the Historical Society, and that is that we're trying to schedule these meetings scattered around the county. So far, we haven't gotten north of Summerdale or Daphne, whichever one it was. Yeah, Daphne, I guess that's right. We want to get one pretty soon up in Stapleton, with the history of when it was Canby and so forth, and eventually work our way up to Stockton. That's our prize. And we have a publication we try to put out every quarterly. We did pretty good for a while, then we skipped one, but we're going to catch up and keep it going. If you're interested in some of the old topics, well, they're not old, they go back about 2 years now. They're on the table over there, and the hard copies we're selling for $4 a piece to cover the printing costs. They're also either are or soon will be all on available on the internet through our Baldwin County Historical Society website. It's not right up to date, but we're going to try to get it up to date this week, and then they should all be on there. Okay, today's program is obviously one that touches a lot of people. So many people have lived in Belforest, or their close ancestors have. Lots of stories to tell. So the format at this time is to get Carolyn to give us a presentation, mostly of the history, and then we'll turn on our array of speakers here, and they will add what Carolyn hasn't already talked about and some personal memories and recollections of theirs. I think Carolyn's going to be a little more general about Belforest, fairly particular about their families. And in the case of Louis Lazary, I think he and Al Risco are going to sort of share the honors and talk a little about the Italian community that's pretty strong out this way and was. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Carolyn. And again, I appreciate y'all coming. Did y'all still hear all right? Again, is it okay?
Yes. Sound-wise.
If it's not, raise your hand and we can turn the volume up a little more.
The legal proofs for the history I will present to you today are on the back tables. I am Carolyn Sermon Wright Porter, a trustee and the president of Belforest Civic League. The first Belforest School was built in 1896. The people of the community wanted their children to be educated. Our community worked together and built in one room, one door, 2 windows, wood shingles on the roof, wooden schoolhouse. Records show that Mr. E.E. Gregory and Mr. E.A. Brooks were instrumental in building that little one-room school. Miss Carrie Gregory, the daughter of E.E. Gregory, was the first teacher. She taught 5 grades. She was a nurse. Miss Perry taught school for 3 years. The children from the Marco, the Bertolli, Lazary, Burroughs, Tryon, Stapleton, White, and Fender families were pupils at this time. The Blueback Speller and the McGuffey Readers were the outstanding textbooks of that era. And since we've just been here, unbelievable. One of has pictures pictures of Miss Carrie. And they are here. They're very precious, and so I would not want them to get mixed up with that stuff in the back. But y'all free to look at it. E. Gregory bought land in Belforest in 1898. E.A. Brooks bought land in 1899. E.E. Gregory bought more land in 1901. A.G. Sermon bought land in 1905. In 1905, the United States appointed postmasters. Belforest postmaster was Mr. E.E. Gregory. Mr. and Mrs. Gregory, Mr. and Mrs. A.G. Sermon, owned the surrounding property of the school. The Gregorys owned 1 acre, and A.G. Sermon owned the adjoining acre, a total of 2 acres. Those 2 acres were sold to the state of Alabama for the sole purpose of the state, what they called number 54. The state paid $5 for the land in 1907. I missed a sentence. In 1906, a fierce hurricane all but demolished the little school. The building was ruined. And then the Gregorys and the Sermons sold the 2 acres to the state to build what they called school number 54. The year and a half that it took to build the school, the pupils attended school in the Hemingway House, located in front of the Garrett home on what is now Garrett Road. 8 grades were taught at this time. They did not have a school bell, so they used an old cultivator sweep to call the children to class. Someone would bang on the sweep with a hammer or some metal instrument to announce school time. Baseball was the favorite game. Boys cleared an area for a diamond in the nearby cotton patch. The new school, called number 54 by the state, was another wood building. This time it had 2 stories. The second story was used as an auditorium. Mr. E.A. Brooks, a neighbor and dedicated trustee of the school, came to read stories to the pupils. He would tell the children how Belforest got its name. He would say it's because the girls and the women of Belforest were so beautiful. They were called Bells of the Forest, thus Belforest. According to the Italian community, the name is a derivative of beautiful forest, thus Belforest. That is how we got our name. My 90-year-old sister, Dorothy, and my sister, Georgine, attended school in the school building with the 2nd story. Dorothy was in the cloakroom cleaning. One day, Miss Ella Robinson, the teacher, sent Marvin Anthony into the cloakroom to get something. And while he was in there, he ran over to Dorothy and kissed her on the cheek. Dorothy was in love. When the children arrived at school, they lined up outside. 4th to 6th grades stood on the south steps. Grades 1 through 3 lined up on the north steps. School opened and the children marched inside. Sometimes they were asked to go to the auditorium on the 2nd floor for an opening ceremony and singing. Dorothy remembers songs like Juanita, Old Black Joe, America, and Swing Low, Sweet Chariot. Her best friend was Teresa Lashley. Mr. E. Gregory of Belforest, the postmaster. The postal service was discontinued in Belforest in 1911. All mail went to Daphne. 1916, Miss May Mackenzie, later she was May Hurley by marriage, became the third teacher hired because attendance had reached 107. The third teacher was needed. The years go by, the community is growing, and in 1919, the 9th grade was added. Then the 10th grade was added, and only student in the 10th grade was Miss Frances Henry, who later married Mr. Fred Markle. Miss Frances returned as a teacher to Belforest in 1924-1926. Joel J. Sermon and Edna M. Miller were married in 1923, my mother and father. They had 6 children. And at this time, 2 teachers were renting a room in my granddaddy's 2-story home. They were Miss Lily Garrett and Miss Mary Ellen Johnson. Dorothy's first grade teacher was Miss Dalazelle Myrick. Dorothy still has a pencil that she won for perfect attendance while in Miss Dalazelle's class. And do you know Dorothy is still kicking? And that would make 84 years ago. Unbelievable. My granddaddy, A.G. Sermon, died in 1936. 1937, the pupils in the school were busy with schoolwork, just a normal school day. It was a cold day. My brother Gordon was at school. The teacher needed to heat the classroom. Miss Jessie May Long, the teacher, asked the older boys to build a fire in the large circular furnace. The boys were eager to please their teacher, so they built a big fire. The flue was not working properly, and with the big fire, it got too hot. The building was on fire. The school practiced fire drills every so often. The students knew what to do when the bell started ringing. The teacher had the students march in a line over to the Myrick home across the road. Victor and Arthur Lashley were called guards. They had to take care of the younger children and get them to safety. Angelo Lashley ran back into the burning building and got all of the lunches. And he also grabbed books from every class. His arms were full. Joyce, my sister, was at home at Granddaddy's house, a big 2-story house that was built on property just north and adjacent to the school buildings right there. She had a terrible stone bruise on her foot and could not walk. While watching the children on the playground, the school started burning. She watched as the school was consumed in flames. No one was injured, thank goodness. But the school building number 2 burned down in 1937. 1938, 1939, the state of Alabama built another school. While waiting for that school to be completed, the pupils went to school in the Belforest Christian Church. School number 3 was made of cement and tile and is the building that are in today. When the school was completed, the state of Alabama put up a plaque that is attached between our two front doors. It reads, Federal Emergency, Administration of Public Works, Franklin D. Roosevelt, President of the United States, Harold L. Ickes, Administrator of Public Works, Belforest School, 1939. Miss Annie Stapleton was a teacher in 38 and 39. She continued to serve as teacher and later principal until 1942. Well, my father died in 1939 and mother had to provide for her 6 children. She decided to renew her teaching certificate and attended the normal school in Daphne. Our home was on the property that my brother Gordon lives on today. Mother started teaching in this school about 1940, and I was 4 years old. Mother and I had to walk to and from school. She wore black orthopedic leather lace-up shoes with big black heels. She was a very determined, fast walker. I remember her steps in the sand, and when she would hit a hard spot, the heel would make a loud noise. I would be jumping from footprint to footprint to keep up with her. When we arrived at school, she went into the schoolhouse, and I had to run on to Granddaddy's. The road was dirt and had a lot of deep sand. I remember dragging my feet through the warm sand. The teacher was Miss Lily Phillips and the sermon and Addie Stapleton. We were taught the Palmer cursive writing method. Some of the games we played at school at recess were jump rope, hopscotch, mambo peg, jacks, Simon Says, and softball. The girls' and boys' bathrooms were large and private. They were made out of tin. The girls' bathroom was under 2 or 3 real large oak trees just outside the girls' bathroom. And we would put up shelves, either with short boards or limbs, and stuck between the trunks or the branches. And we would put old cans, bottles, jars, and pieces of glass on those shelves. Then take turns being the storekeeper, keeping lists and selling items. Dorothy said she remembers in her time when she was at school here that the girls played house under those trees. The boys' bathroom was just east of the school. On the other side of the huge coal pile. Students in the 4th, 5th, and the 6th grades were assigned chores. Some were in bringing in the coal or the wood for the furnace, empty the furnace ashes, bring in buckets of water from the pump in the yard, and students had to clean the lunches that were, clean the blackboards and dust the erasers. All lunches were put in the cloakroom as well as coats, and it had to be cleaned. They had to pick up limbs and trash in the yard, and one chore was to run an oil dust mop over the floor to cut down on the dust. If the students did not have time to clean, the teacher would have to do the work. There were no janitors. I need to drink water. sister Amanda was in first grade. Her boyfriend in first grade was Edward Sims. One day the class was sitting in their little chairs around the circular linoleum rug. Miss Addie Stapleton was the teacher. Edward did not feel very good, so Miss Addie asked Edward to come sit by her. She put her arm around him and comforted him the best she could. School was almost over, and Edward and Mildred Sims were waiting for their father to pick them up. Edward, by this time, could hardly walk, and he was lying on a table while waiting for his dad. Mr. Sims immediately took Edward to Dr. Jordan. Mildred said she remembers Dr. Jordan hitting Edward's knees over and over. She did not like Dr. Jordan hitting his knees. A couple of days later, Edward was diagnosed with infantile paralysis, now known as polio. Since the whole school had been exposed, we were quarantined for 3 weeks. No school for 3 weeks, and could not leave our home for 3 weeks. When the quarantine was lifted, and there were no other cases of polio. The public health nurse visited our school every year. She had to give us shots. She gave us our smallpox vaccinations. One of the nurses was Mrs. Smart, Franklin Smart's mother. All of this nursing stuff just terrified me. I can still smell the Bunsen burner and the little pot of clear liquid bubbling away. I was trying my best to stay out of that woman's reach, and I spent my time running around and around the schoolhouse while the other students got their shots. Eventually, Mother caught me, and the nurse had used her one needle over and over. She only had one needle, and by this time it was more like a nail. I cried, screamed, and hollered, but I got the shot. The school property was fenced in. I remember a pretty gate at the end of the front walkway. The walkway is still out front today. A large double gate was about 100 feet up, further up the fence. It was big. It was to let in the big coal trucks and big trucks. We had to bring our lunches for many years. The students on the bus going to Daphne would have to unload. The children had to wade across the pond covering the road. The empty bus drove through the water, and then on the other side the children reloaded. Cousin Jim Folsom was elected governor at this time. One of his promises was to pave the heavily traveled roads. When Amanda, my sister, was in first grade, she had to walk down that lane, now called Corbin Lane. Corbin Lane. Oh, by the way, it is still dirt. Cousin Joe Garrett was our mail carrier. He stopped his car and asked Amanda where she was going. And she said, school. Cousin Joe said, why? Amanda stood up straight and said, to find a husband. Cousin Joe almost got his car back. The 1940s, our school only had 6 grades. When we finished the 6th grade, we had to go to Daphne Junior High on the bus. 1950, this school was consolidated with Daphne, and this school was closed. The little Belforest school is so proud of inspiring at least 18 students who became teachers and 5 ministers of the gospel. Some of those original students have gone on to have very successful professional careers, some of them very famous, while others stayed on the land and became very successful farmers. 1952. The state of Alabama negotiated the sale of this building and land to the Belforest Civic League Incorporated. Here's a certificate with the first trustees' signatures. They were Albert Corley, Francis P. Marco, and Ben E. Sims. The legal deed of 1952 from the state of Alabama negotiated that sale of this building and land to the Belforest Civic League Incorporated for the sum of $1. It is expressly understood that this land cannot be sold to any private person or organization. Just a minute. And if it ceases to be used as a civic center, it shall revert to the state of Alabama. In closing, I just love our little Belforest school. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Carolyn. We certainly appreciate that. I know I learned an awful lot. And we've got several more speakers, and I asked them to take as much time as they want, as long as it doesn't go too long, so that people don't get too tired. But I think I'll ask Mildred Sims Foster if she'll pick it up from here. And I appreciate you saving your questions, too, until we finish with the speakers, and then we'll have a question and answer session, and I think that'll work great. Mildred?
Mr. Alessandro Rollerico was the founder of the Italian colony in Daphne, Alabama. He bought a tract of Belmont land in 1888, which he later sold to his Italian friends. The majority of Italian families came from Illinois. My mother, Lena Rolanda, came south from Grundy County, Illinois, when she was 6 months old, with her father, Giacomo James Rolanda, and mother, Clara Santer Rolanda. Clara's parents, Leopold and Lena Andre Santer, were originally from Belgium and France. They settled in Belforest, Alabama. Their land deed was signed by Mr. Mastro Olerico. My grandfather, Giacomo James Rolanda, was killed in a farming accident, leaving Clara with several young children to raise. Mother, Lena, and her brothers and sisters stayed on the farm and worked on the farm and went to Belforest too. My father was Ben Edward Sims. He was born in 1896 in Fairfield, Illinois. He came south in a medicine wagon when he was 14 years old. He lived and worked at the Dubrocks in Belforest. He plowed the fields, planted corn.
Hey, speak up a little up there. We can't hear you back here.
He lived in the fields.
Speak into the farm.
Okay.
Better.
Is that better?
Yes.
He lived at the Dubrocks until he joined the Army during World War I. He served with the Corps of Engineers in France. He was in the Battle of St. Guy, several battles, Oregon sectors. He returned to Baldwin County, Alabama, and married my mother, Lena Rolanda. Returned to Europe and served another tour of duty. After the Army, my father was a mechanic until he lost his arm in an auto accident. He then operated a grocery store in Belforest on Highway 181 and 64. It was Highway 27 at that time. He retired in 1970 and then passed away in 1976. Lena, my mother, passed away in 1994. They raised 5 children, all of whom reside in the Belforest and Daphne area. Written by Clara Sims Street and Mildred Sims Foster. I also want to tell you about the Belforest schoolboys. They made a garden and planted vegetables and picked vegetables every morning. Miss Edna Sermon and Miss Addie Stapleton made a big pot of soup. Ben Sims and the PTA and the community put some money together and bought enough cups so each child could have a cup of hot soup for dinner. The PTA also put money together and bought clothes for some families who needed clothes to wear to school. My dad really believed in the PTA and Belforest School. I remember how good that cup of hot soup was. Freddie Black built a miniature farmhouse and barn with running water in the schoolyard. Thank you.
Thank you very much, children. Again, I know I learned some things, and some of the other folks did too. We really appreciate it. Now, if I could ask Walter Henry to say a few words, we'll load some more.
Bill, I hope you can hear me. I'll tell you about some of my ancestors, particularly my mother's people. They came from Monroe County, Alabama. In 1900, they came to Belforest. And he had a family of 12, so it took a big wagon, I guess, to bring them here. And in 1902, number 13 was born. And shortly after that, my grandmother passed away, and she's buried in the cemetery in Daphne at the Methodist Cemetery. She was there. At that time, there was no cemetery here in Belforest for her. In 1903, my mother started a school, and now, I can't tell you about all those 13 of them, 12 others. I can tell you that 5 of the 6 men farmed here in Belforest. The number 6 was left in France during the war. But my mother started a school in that little one-room school she talked about a few minutes ago, and 1906 storm took care of that. So she talked about the building of this school previous to this one. That was the Robinson family. All these was Joseph Winfield Robinson's family. They came from Monroe County. My dad people were not here at that time. My dad people came from Iowa on the way to Alabama or Mississippi or somewhere. They took a while. My dad was born in 1995, and he was 18. Get a little confused sometimes. Somebody told me a while ago that they had the right to be that way. They're not as old as I am. So anyway, my mother went to school there, and she went to school, the other school, the two-story building that Carolyn talked about a few minutes ago. I would like for my wife to read a letter to you that our daughter, wrote 20, 30 years ago. 40. She interviewed her grandmother about her education. If you do that,
Belforest. The source of my information for this article was my paternal grandmother, Mrs. Bessie Robinson Penry. She was born in 1897 and will be 74 this September. This was written in 2017.
1970.
She lived almost her entire life in Belforest. And she was both a student and a teacher in the Belforest school. The first school she could remember was a small one-room schoolhouse. And the main thing she remembered about it was that it had a wood stove, and it was overheated, and she started in 1903. One of her earliest memories was of the stovepipe fell off, and everything turned black with soot. And she also said one of the things, they had no running water in the school, and so they had a pail with a dipper, and everybody drank out of the same dipper.
Yeah.
So I guess if somebody caught something, it made the round. But she said that this school was destroyed by the Great Hurricane in 1906. And then the other school was built, and before the school was built, the classes were continued in the Hemingway House, an old home in Belforest. There was a two-room school, one for the boys and one for the girls. And she said there were also separate teachers for the boys and girls. The segregation by sex even continued to the playground, where a teacher drew a line to separate them. This didn't keep them completely apart, however. The boys would often come up to the very edge of the line to talk to the girls. Said at this school there was no bell to signal the change of classes, so that one of the teachers hit a plow sweep with a hammer. That's about the same information. And it said the following year, in 1907, a new school was built, and it had two stories with two rooms on the first floor and one large on the second. The school year was shorter, lasting only 7 months. And that the school day though was from 8:30 to 4, and so the subjects were basically the same as they were taking in Daphne. And our daughter wrote this when she was in the 9th grade at Daphne in Alabama history. And this school burned in 1937 and was replaced by the present day Belforest Civic Center. Walter said if he ever got in trouble at church, at school, he got in trouble at home, because most of these people you mentioned were either his cousins or his aunt or somebody.
And they didn't mind telling on him about that. Let me know in the back if y'all can't hear at any time, if we can talk about it.
Okay, well, along in 1916, my father's parents came to Belforest, and my dad was floating around somewhere and ended up in France. He was in the army. My mother taught school during that time, and it was a schoolhouse over in Gates Woods. You know where Gates Woods is out here across Sticks River, and she was there for a couple of years. I don't know exactly how long. And then my dad and mother married in 1921, and I have a sister born soon after, and I have a brother that was later born, and dad and mother went to Toledo for about 4 years and back to Belforest. I think they like it better here. Less snow and ice. And, but in 1937, my grandfather died, and that's the same year the school burned. And then Grandpa Penry died in 1947, and he'd gone to Mobile from here, and my Aunt Frances taught school in Mobile. And since the school time was longer in Mobile than in Baldwin County or in Belforest, she took my sister and brother to Mobile for about a month, for a couple of years to go to school. And so that helped. Those kids liked it. The first year that I started school, the school bus came and turned around in front of our house. Up till then, my sister and two sisters and brother walked to school, walked up here to school, and which is about 3 miles. And long about that time, if you had to live within 1.5 miles of school. The bus didn't stop to pick you up. You had to walk. I remember when we left here going to Daphne school, that all these kids would be walking the street going to school. We'd ride the bus down, but all those. And I remember seeing Mildred Sims walking home in the afternoon when the bus would be bringing us down the road, and we would be walking. She'd be walking home. We had a little unusual thing on about that time. I don't guess you can do it now. You might get put in jail. But our bus driver was really good to us kids, and we stopped at the Sims store. And we could go in and Mrs. Liza Trump had an ice cream parlor there, and we could get ice cream, or we could get candy or chewing gum or whatever we wanted to at the store. Right, Louis? But we did that, and that was the order of the day. I think Carolyn has covered about everything about the school. It was an ugly sight to see the school burn when you're about 7 years old or something like that. It doesn't look very pretty. And, so I thank you for your time, and thank you for being here.
Thank you very much, Malcolm. Again, we keep learning. And Malcolm Garrett to say a few words.
I'm Malcolm Garrett. And my grandpa and grandma came to Baldwin County.
All right, Garrett, speak up a little bit. Everybody here now.
Grandma and Grandpa Garrett came to Baldwin County in 1898. They lived in the vicinity of Old Texas. I think it's in Monroe County. But they came here, and my daddy was the first child born in Baldwin County of their children. He was the 13th. And buildings, one of them was talking about the post office. And my Uncle Joe carried the mail. Before Uncle Joe carried the mail, Grandma's brother, we called him Uncle Doc. I don't know what his name was. Uncle Doc He carried the mail in a horse and buggy. Went down under the hill in Daphne. On Capitol Hill Drive, then out through Belforest. Later on, when he retired, my daddy was his substitute. And a lot of times when I would take off on vacation, we didn't have a car. I remember going to see Jim Gaston about renting a car so he could carry the mail for 2 weeks. After Uncle Joe died, or retired rather, Dad carried the mail for a couple of years, and they had another carrier, and he was his substitute. And after that carrier left, carried the mail for another period of time, a year or two. I don't remember how long it was. And Mama was his substitute. And after I got my driver's license, Uncle Joe, the carrier, and he fell over a fence while he was there and broke his arm. 6 or 8 weeks, so Mama was the carer. And I was the chauffeur. Wasn't supposed to have a chauffeur. But Mr. Gordon Stimson, who was the postmaster in there, he said, as long as the inspector don't catch it, it'll be all right. The inspector never did catch us, but Shorty Murphy did. Shorty was highway patrol. And we were coming down 31 in Spanish Fort, and I guess I looked so young, he pulled us over. Guess what? Mac's driver's license was at the house. He didn't give me a ticket, Mama talking about it. I got to check something. After the school burned out, and by the way, I missed the big fire. I had tonsillitis the day of the fire, and Mama kept me on work. Because I got my fanny dusted many times from some of my neighbors. And me and Luke would sit up here, and we would plot what we were going to do to them. Never did get even one. That's good. I remember one afternoon, it was dove in the fall, and they had split season on dove. Well, me and Luke decided we were going to go dove shooting. So I know him, Mr. Joe Ladry's field, right behind where Vic was at to live. And late in the afternoon, those birds come in there by the harvest. Well, it was between seasons. And both of us shooting an old single barrel shotgun. I don't know where we got the shells for this during the war. But we eased over there and we was laying them on the ground. Wasn't gonna pick them up, got through. Happened to look over at the water tourist house, and the cars pulled up and stopped. And this guy climbed up on a gate and was looking over there at us. That was Fred Smith, the game warden. Well, Mr. Fred, he wasn't too swift on his feet. But me and Brother Newt was. We cleared 2 fences. Uncle Joe had a patch of corn down there. It was dried and it had soybean, velvet beans planted in it. And if you've ever been to a velvet bean in a corn patch, it's like a donut. But them little bullets, we made it to the house and hid our guns in the barn and didn't come out for hours. And of course, back then there wasn't a stock law. You had to keep your fence, your field's fence to keep the cattle out. There was sheep, cattle, all over the place down around our house. So one day I sat up that old horse and I was meandering down through the woods and I saw this big old bug. I said, oh boy, I'm gonna catch you. And guess what? I don't know who was talking. But I shook out a move and I threw it. I got that scepter around the horse. Ain't nobody ever thrown a pretty loose than that. But let me tell you something else. Ain't nobody ever want to get loose from it. That horse had sense. He couldn't throw that bull because the bull was bigger than he was. And we were flying out through the woods. I had a little raggedy pocket now. And I finally got it out. And I cut that rope and it sang like I don't know what. Oh, he left me. The saddle come off. He went home and I walked home. But we had a good time and in this little community. It ain't a little community anymore. It's a carcass city. I understand we're going to get a new school. An elementary school. but I gotta say this. If we don't pay that 8% tax, property tax, we ain't gonna get squat. They're bringing in high-priced jobs to our area. And our kids and grandkids, if they don't have an education, they're gonna be flipping the hamburgers, putting gas in the automobile, while somebody else's kids from some other county comes in and gets the high-paying job. I urge everybody, vote yes, and I'm not a politician. Politicians, all they're interested in is getting rid of that. And you'll hear them say, no more taxes, that's stupid. Excuse me. I think so.
Okay, I'm going to turn it over to, we got a slight change here. We're going to let Al Garisco talk for a few minutes first, and then we'll get back to Louis Lazary. Both of them can talk for hours about the Italian community, but they're going to limit it a little bit.
I think most of y'all know that there was a group of Italian citizens.
Louder, we can't hear you.
And my mother came to Belforest, I think it was 1898, and she was on her way to school. And by the way, her school teacher was Elodie Hall. She rode a horse from Moxley, I don't know how she crossed the road, but there's no story. And she was my mother's teacher here in this location. It was the first school. Anyway, the Italian group was, there were many, and I won't go into that, but I will tell you that very shortly we will be coming out with a story about the Italian colony, and it'll be the Mobile Lady Monthly, and I'll let you know that. Oh, okay. On my mother's first day of school here, she was walking from where the Lazarus just straight up the road on the other side of 64. Anyway, she was passing a neighbor and Constantinople, and they saw that the child had no lunch. And so they didn't know that how long the school session would last or whatever. I don't know why they didn't have lunch, but they didn't. So she made a lunch for my mother. She put some sausage in the bottom of a tin bucket and a cup of wine. My mother was probably the first violator. Alcohol in school was all the time. Anyway, that's all I want to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Al. Al and my first cousins. His mother was one of my dad's older sisters.
Hey, look, we're back here. We need to be talking louder.
But I'm not used to the farmers don't work on these mics. But anyway, they came to Baldwin. My grandparents came to Baldwin County in 1896, and they bought the property here right up on 64. And they paid $3 an acre for it. They bought over 200 acres. And anyway, my dad was born the next year in 1897. And anyway, he ended up being the oldest son. And they survived out there on the land, and they had planted corn and, little stuff, and cleared a few acres of land. But I say my dad ended up being the oldest brother, and you wouldn't believe, and he was 6 or 7 or 8 years old. He would take the horse and buggy. But anyway, he would take the horse and the wagon and would go to Daphne.
We're still doing it. Can you back up to the
But anyway, you wouldn't believe what went on with those days like that. That he would take maybe some eggs and butter and what have you. And I never thought to ask him how much money he brought brought back, but it may not be but $1 or $2. But anyway, they, like I said, it was just, they survived, you know. And anyway, my mother and father married in 1920, and my oldest sister was born in 1921. We had a large family, and
Louis, might get you to step back a little bit.
several things. But anyway, we had a large family, and there was 10 of us born, and all of us survived except the last baby was born. It was premature, and it did not live. But anyway, I go back to 2 of the days. I was in 2nd grade when the school burned, and I remember it just like it was yesterday. And also, and the reason I drove the assistant bus driver when I was 15, all the men was in the Army, and so they backed up to get a license. I got it when I was 15 years old. And like I said, Gordon Sermon drove the bus, and he wanted to play football, so he asked me when I drive home, and I did. A 15-year-old drive the bus home. So he graduated, and then the next year, they asked me to drive, so I drove 2 years in the bus like that, you know. But anyway, we grew up in agriculture my whole life. I was close to my father, and I know after I was 4 years old, going on 5, and everywhere he went, I went. I knew the Mr. Cordy, the older Mr. Arthur Cordy, and I knew all the patrollers and the leaguers and everybody, and I would go with him to the packing sheds, and, you know, like I say, 1935 or 36, you know. And anyway, I got out of school in 1948 from Fairhope, and went right into farming myself, and in fact, we dug potatoes that afternoon before I graduated that night to go to high school. And anyway, the agriculture has come so far, and even in my lifespan. And I remember my dad would plow the mules, and he would lay the fur out with called a Georgia stock with a little shovel thing on it. And then he had, they call it a knocker. It was a thing that put the fertilizer out. And it was, when the mule pulled it here, and it reached, there's times it had over 40,000 acres of potatoes in Baldwin County. It's unbelievable how many thousands of box cars were, you know, shipped out of Locksley and on a rail car like that. Yeah. But anyway, it was, and then, you know, got into different things. There was always cattle. Everybody had cattle. Everybody had pecan trees and what have you. It was just, you know, it was just planted all kind of crops, all kind of big gardens. And anyway, we were able to survive out there on the farmland, you know. But anyway, it's, like I said, I remember seeing him with that little Georgia stock. Now, in this county, there's farmers that have 16-row planters to plant crops with now. And anyway, they have combines, some of them 32 feet wide headers, and the John Deere company now has just came out recently with a combine with a header that's 45 feet wide, you know. So you can imagine the advancement that I have seen in my life, you know, in agriculture like that, you know. And some of the tractors probably, they got some of those tractors all 4-wheel pull and articulate. And anyway, those tractors probably got near 500 horsepower, you know. And it's just unbelievable how agriculture's changed in this part of the country as well as this whole nation, you know. And anyway, it's really been, you know, I've enjoyed it. Just for me to have a great life out here in this country and farming, and I enjoy it so much. And I'm thankful that everything is going like it has, you know. And I thank you all so very much.
for questions for a little while. If you could really speak up, we may be able to get by without the microphone. So, any questions? Yes.
It sounds strange that I'm not in this area. But he was talking about the potatoes. Up in Michigan, there's a lot of farming in our area. And they always had a week off called potato vacation, where they closed down the school and everybody went out and picked potatoes. My wife's area in upstate New York, in the muck farms, of course, they had big onions. And they used to close down school so the kids could go out and pick and top the onions. I'm just wondering if this is such an agricultural community, if they ever did anything like that.
I can say one thing, having gone to school, elementary school and high school in Pensacola, Florida, that we always envied the people in Baldwin County because they got out earlier than we did, exactly for that reason, to get busy with potatoes. Anything else, Lou?
One other thing I was going to say, is way back when I was a little tiny boy, and they had what you call a potato tour. They traveled all this county, and we ended up down one of the times we ended up down called Burke Hill. Most have never heard of such a place. It was out of the gate, and they feed us down there, They had it for a great number of years, I call it potato tour, And one other thing, that I was in Walmart this morning, and I was looking at the potato rack, they were 98 cents a pound. And when I was 6 or 7 or 8 years old, my dad sold 100 pounds sometimes for 75 cents. They wouldn't buy the little creamers. They could buy, and once in a while they buy the B size, the next size, they buy that once in a while. And I say it's unbelievable how times have changed so much over those years like that.
Any other questions? Okay, I just say if anybody here has not signed our little sign-in sheet, I sort of appreciate it to get an idea of how many people we have today. I'm pretty sure this is a record. Prior to this, we had 82, and I think we beat that today. And if anybody wants to join this Baldwin County Historical Society, our dues are $10 a year. We're trying to have a program every month except for November and December, and we're moving them around the county, as I mentioned earlier, and we hope to get up to the northern part of the county before too long. So without further ado, I say thank you all for coming, and I've got some certificates I want to present to our speakers, so I'll do that right now. Thank you.